Hello and welcome to the I've Seen Everything Reaction Wrap-Up. My name's Andrew and I'm glad to have you here with me. This is where I share my thoughts, rating, and review following my most recent reaction or watch-along video. To find these reaction and watch-along videos, please visit @SeenEverything over on YouTube. Please be sure to click the follow button here on the podcast, and for those listening on Apple Podcasts, a rating and review would be greatly appreciated. And now, on to this episode's wrap-up for Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Well, that was a lot of fun to watch. It had been a while. I honestly don't know how long it's been since I've watched that movie all the way through. But it's an interesting story. It's a fun movie to watch. They created some really interesting characters for this movie. Jessica Rabbit has had a life all her own after this movie, just as far as Halloween costumes and tattoos and all kinds of stuff. But it is surprising to me still that they never did anything really with Roger and Jessica and all the rest of them ever again. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do we ever see them anywhere else again? Was there a TV show at some point, or did they do other movies? I don't believe they did. Like I said, I think there was when this came out, there was probably I can imagine there being like a video game on the Nintendo or something. Definitely seems like a waste if they never did anything else with those characters, but maybe there just wasn't, enough interest. Who knows? I still think that this movie is pretty beloved even today, so it still seems like they could come back and do more with them now if they wanted to, or something. But it also was a beautiful crossover with the characters from all these different places. I mean, you saw Disney characters, you saw Warner Brothers characters, you saw other characters too. They had Betty Boop in there, which I don't believe is, owned by Disney or Warner Brothers. You had Woody Woodpecker in there, which I think is another one that's not owned by either one of them. You had a number of different characters that were well-known characters. It just seemed like this big kind of collaboration to bring all of these beloved animated characters together in one space for at least this one moment. And for someone who as a kid grew up watching that stuff a lot, that was a lot of fun. Not to say those were really of my lifetime that much. I mean, there was Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse stuff going on in the 80s and 90s, but a lot of the cartoons I grew up watching, mainly like Looney Tunes stuff, were from much earlier, 40s and 50s, that kind of stuff. They were things that were played during a time period like this in the theaters, but they just got replayed forever just because they were still funny. They were still entertaining for kids. I mean, it really says something for the comedy of that type of animation. If it's still funny to kids decades later, it still would work with kids today, probably. Although maybe a little more violent than some parents might want for their kids today. But yeah, I think that's how I always think of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's just kind of a love letter to old kids animation and stuff. But also, again, very much pushing against that border of something they were exploring in apparently the late 80s, but also into the early 90s, which was this kind of edgy push in animation to have animation that wasn't for kids. That was the thing. It's something that gets lost to history these days. But for instance, I was a teenager when Beavis and Butthead first came out and got big and all of that. And then South Park was something that came around later. But it was a big deal. And the reason it was a big deal was these were, at least for the time period, kind of vulgar cartoons. These were cartoons that were not aimed at children. They were very immature in a lot of respects, but they were telling dirty jokes and had dirty premises and all this kind of stuff. And they were swearing in some cases, and a lot of this. That was not stuff that happened in cartoons. That was not stuff you saw in cartoons at all until pretty much the 90s. They started kind of pushing those limits. I compared some of the stuff going on in Roger Rabbit here to another couple of animated features I saw in this time period. Another one that also had to do with kind of real world people mixing with our animated characters. There was a movie called Cool World that, ironically, as of the recording of this, I watched Hereditary earlier today. Gabriel Byrne was in that. Gabriel Byrne starred in Cool World. He was an animator, and he created all of these characters and then somehow got sucked into his animation. Brad Pitt was in there playing a real world cop in a toon world somehow. Kim Basinger was in there playing this lead animated character he'd created, kind of a Jessica Rabbit type character, but even dirtier. It was a PG-13 cartoon. It was definitely something that was not meant for kids. And it was, again, kind of pushing that line. What was the other one I said? Oh, Bebe's Kids. Bebe's Kids, as I understand it, was based on a comedy routine. I forget the comedian's name now, but he did the voice for the character in the movie. And again, it wasn't like over the top, like not for kids, but it was like not necessarily like your Disney stuff you were used to. And so that led into other types of animation that it was a novelty back then. And it was kind of seen as this edgy kind of limit pushing type thing when you got into the Beavis and Buttheads and the South Parks. Aeon Flux was kind of an Americanized version of anime. Anime back in those days, they did have like kids anime, and they still do today, Pokemon and The Last Airbender and all these kind of things. But adult animation that was coming out of Japan, or adult anime back in those days, was a novelty as well. These things that dealt with violent and adult themes and stuff. So this was kind of at the front edge of that, if I'm remembering correctly, as far as how all of it unfolded, which was part of the appeal too. I do find it surprising. I simultaneously kind of find it surprising and don't find it surprising. Because I don't find it surprising because it was the 80s. And, people got away with more stuff in the 80s that you wouldn't get away with today, and understandably so. Some of it was kind of messed up. But also, this is Disney and Warner Brothers we're talking about. And I think maybe Warner Brothers was a little looser back then, but Disney in particular. Like, to have a shot with Mickey talking like, oh, you're going to die, like that kind of stuff. It's, I'm surprised they let them do that with their characters. I mean, these places are generally pretty strict with their characters and what they want their characters depicted doing or saying or whatever. A more recent example I remember is when the NetherRealm Studios that does the Mortal Kombat games, they did a DC Mortal Kombat crossover. And it was the only Mortal Kombat game that couldn't have fatalities because they didn't want to show Superman or Batman killing people or like any of their characters. So the idea of studios, these big entities being careful with their characters and what they want them depicted doing. It's not to say any of this stuff was terribly over the line, but it was kind of on the line for like a kids thing or a kids type thing, especially even for the late 80s. I'm glad the movie exists. I think it's really enjoyable. I think there's a lot of people who still love the movie. In this day and age, I'm surprised that they haven't, again, done more of it, that it hasn't gotten picked up somewhere, that they didn't even go further with it. There's certainly more adult animation out there now. Not that much of a novelty anymore. But anyway, I really enjoyed watching it again. I really appreciate having you here with me. And that's going to do it for us today for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I want to go ahead and remind you, check out the Patreon over there. It's still completely free until we get it up and going. The full-length reaction for Who Framed Roger Rabbit will be over there, likely long before this YouTube edit is, along with a few other full-length reactions that I've done since the start of the Patreon. I'm hoping to get some of the old ones up over there if I can figure out how to do that properly. But there's going to be exclusive content over there if there isn't already. Hopefully there already is, of exclusive television watch-alongs and all of that. I have some, pretty big TV shows to catch up on, and I hope you'll join me to watch those. If you'd be so kind, please go ahead and rate, comment, and share this episode of the podcast. Really helps me out here. And folks, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for hanging with me during this tricky time. I will do my best to be back with you to make more videos very, very soon. Keep your eyes open, stay tuned, keep looking for me. I'll be back, I promise. And we'll get back to somewhat of a normal schedule here, hopefully in the near future. Thanks again for being here today, and take care. Have a good day. Thank you for listening to the I've Seen Everything Reaction Wrap-Up. Again, to find these reaction and watch-along videos, please visit @SeenEverything over on YouTube. Please consider following the podcast, and for those on Apple Podcasts, a rating and review are always appreciated. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll meet you here on the next episode.